Okay, hello. Happy Mental Health Action Day, everyone. We're here today because the Kennedy Forum and Brightline are deeply committed to shifting the mental health culture in this country from awareness to action. Now, it's been well documented that our youth are struggling. Many of you hopefully have seen the recent series in the New York Times. We know that the pandemic has exacerbated already rising rates of depression, anxiety, addiction, eating disorders, and more. This year, the president, the surgeon general, and our nation's largest pediatric health organizations have all issued warnings that we've crossed a dangerous line into crisis mode. For parents and other caregivers, this can be a difficult thing to navigate. Many of us are left wondering, could this be my kid? So today we want to provide a little guidance, answer some of the most common questions around youth mental health, and just really help people out that there are better things and better ways to understand this big picture. So I'd like to introduce Lina Rodas, who is a behavioral therapist at a company called Brightline that partners with many of the nation's leading employers and health plans to provide virtual mental health care and resources to families. Lina, thanks so much for your time today.
Thanks, Amy, for having me.
So, Lina, so many of us get these gut feelings when it comes to our kids, and we can tell when something's off. How can parents address those feelings?
I think I think it's so important for parents, just to validate those concerns. We're all parents and we're going to have these feelings whenever we see our children maybe acting a little differently. Maybe we see changes in their behaviors. So first I want to say, that is okay. It is okay to have these concerns. It's okay to have these conversations, to really invite our children into those conversations, to ask, hey, maybe reflect back to them. I noticed that something's different. I noticed that maybe you've been acting a little bit different than I normally experience you. So really inviting our young people and our children to have really open communications with us, maybe sharing how we're feeling, sharing something about our own days, really normalizing that, that we all have bad moods, that we all have bad days, and that we're concerned about something, that when we feel concerned, we like talking about it. Really being open and transparent, I think, is the really big key here to really opening up dialogue. And then asking further questions. Again, if we're asking our young people questions, and we have a lot of resources at our disposal as well, we can even ask our school counselors, we can ask our pediatricians, really inviting a team of people to really support us and really trying to understand the concerns that we're having.
It's so hard, to know what is typical and what is a little something more to be concerned about. What are the most common things that you're seeing as far as mental health challenges that children face?
As a clinician, we see a number of things, but I think the most common, I think research shows this as well, but just as a Brightline clinician, for children, we're often coming in with concerns around ADHD, right? Attention deficit hyperactivity disorder. Maybe our young people are struggling with concentration and focus, maybe some impulsivity, difficulty really controlling the energy that's coursing through their bodies. Depression is another one that we see a lot in our young people and children. We really see that is something that, as we're talking about the pandemic and the impact of the pandemic on our nation, is something that we're really seeing a rise in children and our young people. We see a lot of anxiety. Again, most of us experienced this during the pandemic. A lot of concerns, a lot of worry, a lot of excessive fears, and this absolutely translates to our children and young people. This is something that we absolutely see. And behavioral challenges, really, behavioral problems. This is really what we start to see in this age group. And this is where we start to see the majority of reasons that parents or young people are accessing our services right now.
Yeah, I'm hearing a lot from educators about the behavioral challenges that they're seeing in the classroom. I'm hearing that depression and anxiety have gone up. What are some of the signs of depression and anxiety in children that we should look for?
I think that's a great question, Amy. And I think it's so important to really recognize that children and young people really might express mental health challenges in a very different way than adults do. And that's the first and foremost. The really key indicator for our young people are changes in behavior, because they don't always have the language or the ability to really articulate what's going on in their life. So it's really important to pay attention to signs in behavior, changes in their functioning. And we're thinking about depression. We're also thinking about their mood. Do they look sad? Is the way that they're sharing their experiences about their day really negative? Do they look pretty stuck in the negativity of what's going on around them? When we're looking at depression, we're also looking loss of pleasures. So things that they really used to enjoy. If you have a child that used to enjoy, playing soccer and they don't want to do it anymore. If you have a child that really enjoyed being social and they don't want to do that anymore. So really paying attention, and these are really good indicators and sign. And then for our young people and children, we often see a lot of anger and irritability. This is something that we constantly see. This is a really good marker and indicator. And then for anxiety, I think the biggest one is excessive worrying, right? Do you have a child that's constantly, well, what if this happens? And what if this happens? And what if you're not here when I get out of school? We start to see a lot of young children expressing fear around mom and dad not showing up after school, really worried if they can't see them in their own home. I didn't see you. I got really scared. So if we see this increase in this fear, really this exacerbation, and these worries around a number of different things, these are all really key indicators for us for anxiety and depression. And again, the really key here, because our young people might not have the language yet or the ability to express themselves in the way that we understand, is behavior changes. Really looking at this, school refusal, things that they are no longer doing that they used to enjoy. These are all really key indicators for this age period.
Is there kind of an amount of time that we should look for, or how do we know when a parent should seek professional help for their young person? Is there a certain indicator that now we better escalate this or take it to a professional?
It's a really great question. I think that's one of the biggest questions we get asked as clinicians. It's like, when do I seek help? I wasn't sure. Did I do it the first time I saw them expressing an anxiety or a worry, or they started to get more scared? Or is this just regular normative development, right? Our kids have bad moods and that's normal. Everybody has anxiety. That's normal. I think that's a really good question. And I think the biggest thing here is, when we think of it as something that we need to address, is it causing any kind of challenge in something that they're doing, right? An impairment in functioning is really what we're looking at. Having anxiety is a very normal feeling. Anxiety is a feeling that we all are going to feel. Now, does that anxiety cause the inability to attend school? Does it cause the inability to attend to things that they need to do on a daily basis, like getting ready for school? Do they struggle? I don't know what to wear. I'm really concerned that this wasn't going to look good. What are my friends going to say, right? If we're seeing that, our morning routine that used to last, 15, 20 minutes is now an hour, or we're really struggling to get them out of bed. So these are really good markers. It's what is challenging. How is this impacting my child or our life as a family? So this is a really good, indicator, and it's something that we need to pay attention to when we're wondering when we should seek professional support.
That's really helpful. It's hard to know. I have 5 kids of my own, and as the parent of a teenager, you know, figuring out when it is kind of a typical teenager moodiness or something else is always that balance. I have, for years talked to our kids about mental health. Patrick's been very open with his own challenges. I'm not sure we do it the right way. Is there a best way to talk to kids in general, whether or not something is wrong?
That's a really good one, Amy, and something we also hear a lot of. And I think the first thing is, we're not perfect, and neither are our children.
For sure.
There's no really right way. I think that we just need to normalize having feelings. We need to normalize having conversations. We need to be talking about these things. We need to be talking about mental health and opening up the dialogue. I think it's so key and important. I think that when we're talking about mental health, we want to normalize it in our homes. So sharing how we're doing on a daily basis. Some of us as parents are often concerned. We don't want to burden our children. We don't want to overwhelm them with our problems. But in doing that, sometimes what we do is we create this unrealistic expectation for them, that mommy and daddy are these perfect human beings that never struggle, that never have, worries or concerns. And that's not the message we want to give. We want to give a message that we all have bad days, that we all have various different feelings, that it's normal to experience fear. It's normal to experience anxiety, that they are uncomfortable. And sometimes I think that we struggle because we're uncomfortable with our own children's distress. So we don't want to open up these conversations at times. Like, what if I don't know what to say is a constant concern for parents. And that is okay. It is okay to say, that's a really great question. Maybe we can do some research together. Maybe we can ask your school counselor together. What if we were to go see a therapist together? Maybe ask some of these questions. So again, I really feel like there is no real right way, but there is a good way to have open dialogue with our young people, with our children, around just normative stressors that life has them. And it's about how we deal with them. What are we doing to manage our anxiety? What are we doing to manage, when we're feeling really sad? What does mommy do when she's really sad? What does mommy do when she's really tired and overwhelmed? How does that feel for me? How does it feel when I can't solve a problem for my child or for you? Sometimes I feel really helpless. Do you ever feel that way? So again, it's about dialogue. It's about transparency. It's about being open in our communication and really not creating this image of the super parent, because that's an expectation that we're creating for our young people, and saying, well, mom has it figured out all the time. Mom never struggles. But we all know as parents, as human beings, that is not the case.
That's right. So I'm hearing you say modeling that same vulnerability and help seeking behavior that we want to see from them. Is that right?
Absolutely.
So it seems to me that those who are tuning in today are already doing that. They're already looking and seeking out how to best navigate this. Do you have any specific strategies for those listening today um, that parents could do when their child looks sad or anxious?
Yeah, no, I think it's so important. One of the things that we do as parents is as inadvertently want to step in and problem solve all the time. We're constantly saying like, it's not that big of an issue. It's okay. Like just get this done, right? Our kids are overwhelmed and we're like, just do this one thing and it won't be a problem. And I really think that's it's a like it's our natural inclination as parents to want to solve the issue, to want to help our children feel better. But what we're doing is we're denying them the experience. And it's a very normative experience to how do you manage stress? How do you manage anxiety? So one of the first things for parents, I think, is the message we want to give is first, let's manage our own anxiety. First, let's take a step back, take a deep breath as we're opening this dialogue. If we see that our child is feeling anxious, I think the first thing to do is listen. Let's just listen. Let's invite our children to have a conversation or invite them just to not, to really just be able, what do you need? What's the best way for me to support you? To really acknowledge and validate their feelings and their experience. Often parents, we inadvertently invalidate when we say things like, at least it's not that big of a deal, or it's not that big of a deal. We're trying to minimize it, but in reality, what we're communicating is that it's not that big of an issue, but for them, it is. So really validating is the first and key part of how we support our young people. Listening, attentively listening, not with the goal to inform them how they're feeling, because they are the experts of their experience. They are the experts of their internal world. So really key here, when we acknowledge, when we invalidate, when we recognize our young people and our children, that is the best way that we can support them. And really then inviting, can I help you problem solve? Would this be helpful to you? Could I sit here? Can I give you a hug? Would that be helpful to you? So really inviting them to be part of the solution, inviting them to be part of the coping that we're hoping that we can model for them, right? Opening up, talking, modeling, invitations. This is what we're doing. And this is the best way to support our young people.
I'm reminded of a young person I heard yesterday talking about um, how much they get out of storytelling and connecting that way, but not storytelling as much as story listening. That it's not just in the telling, but in someone hearing you. And so, that really goes to your point. If we see a child that's stressed or overwhelmed, what is the best way to support that child? I remember even with um, our own kids, of course, they have busy schedules, all these things are happening. I was getting very frustrated with just kind of being late, and it felt overwhelming trying to get everybody out the door. And that was the sign to me that maybe we needed to pick and choose what things we were going to be a part of and dial it back. But I know kids often may feel stressed or overwhelmed, even if their parents feel like it's manageable. What should we do?
Yeah, absolutely. That's a great question. And again, I think this is a really key part for parents to reflect, like you just said. Is there too much on our plates, right? As we're stressed, our children are stressed. So one of the key parts here is to model, again, how do we manage our own stress, right? What is mom and dad doing when we're stressed, right? And talking about it out loud, so we often tell our children, do as I say, not as I do. That is not going to happen. Kids are constantly looking. They're observing everything that we're doing. So if we're stressed and we're yelling, we're getting, we're pressuring everyone. Let's get out the door. Let's go. We got to go. I mean, which parent hasn't done
I
that?
do that a lot, Lena. I do that a lot.
So,
Oh,
so really recognizing our own patterns within our home too, right? How do we manage stress as a group? How do we manage, like that dynamic in the mornings or afternoons when we start to feel pressured? And again, I think just modeling how we do that adaptively in a healthy way. So, having conversations out loud, I'm feeling like I just put too much on my plate today. I'm going to prioritize and I'm going to take a few things off. I wonder if there's anything on your plate we can take off, you know? I noticed that you're feeling more stressed. I'm wondering if I'm contributing to that. Can you tell me if that's something that mommy or daddy can help with? Is there a way that I can communicate to you in a different way that doesn't stress you more, right? We want to help build agency. And part of the way we do that is we allow our young people to work through these feelings, to really learn to problem solve, and to give them the agency that they can absolutely do this for themselves. Because in doing that, they're building resiliency. They're building opportunities to really say, I can do this. And if we're constantly adding to their stress or saying they're ineffective in the way they're managing their own stress, what are we communicating?
so, we know that they can be stressed, and kids say a lot of things when they're either overwhelmed, stressed, in a moment. How much should we really worry if a child says they want to hurt themselves?
Well, there's a short and a long answer to that. The short answer is yes, we should always worry.
Mhm.
As a clinician, we're able to assess and really try to get at the function of why a young person might say they want to hurt themselves. What we're not doing though is dismissing what they're saying as something that is either invalid or something that is manipulative. It's the way that we're understanding the behavior. So really what I want to stress here is regardless of what the function of why they said what they said is, we want to know that that's an expression of something that's not okay. That is an expression of distress, is an expression of pain. It's an expression, it's saying something to us. So rather than saying, do I have to listen? Should I should I take this? And for what it is at face value, what is it communicating is the question we want to ask. And really, when we get to that level you know, of what we're communicating now to either we want to either kill ourselves or we want to hurt ourselves, it's still expressing something. And that is what we want to understand. So to parents everywhere, it's really important that we never dismiss when our child is saying they want to hurt themselves or they want to kill themselves, regardless if that's just in a way to express how overwhelmed they feel. It's still
Mm.
indicating something, and it's indicating that they need support. It's indicating that they need help, and it's indicating that they need more.
Right. So it may, even if you're thinking that that threat is not something that they are planning to act on, we still could see within that comment that they made that it's just a symptom of of some feelings that they're having, of being overwhelmed or something else that still needs to be addressed, whether or not we think they're going to act on them. So,
Absolutely. Absolutely. We always want to address it and we want to take it as face value. If your child says they want to hurt ourselves, we want to say we're listening. We want to
yeah.
say we're here. Let's do this together. How do I support you? Let's find some support. Let's find some help together. Again, we do not want to dismiss. We do not want to invalidate. We always want to be preventative here. We don't want to be then hindsight later on saying like, I should have listened, right? So here is one of those moments in life where, we want to say to parents everywhere, take it seriously, take it for face value, and say to your child, I am here, I am listening, let's find help together.
How can you tell when a child's just being manipulative and doesn't want to go to school?
That's a great question. And I think, this is a controversial answer, probably. I'm going to say it's probably not the greatest thing to think of it as manipulative. And I think
Yeah.
that's the key. Manipulation as a word has a negative connotation. It already comes with its own feelings. If we think something's manipulative, our response is going to change. It's going to
Mhm.
be dismissive. It's going to be maybe punitive. It's going to be very invalidating. So really, it's the way that we're looking at the behavior. So instead, again, the question should be, what is it communicating? So if it's school refusal, what is it communicating? Is my child feeling overwhelmed? Are they experiencing, a lot of peer pressure or social expectations? What's going on in terms of academic stress? What can I do to support them? So really, instead of asking, is it manipulative? Let's go with, what is it communicating? And let's open up the dialogue again. Let's invite them to have a conversation about what might be contributing to the behavior.
So, when we see that and we're thinking about it and trying to look at it in that light, sometimes it's hard to um, navigate when we see that kids seem to have so much energy and motivation for the things that they want to do, their friends or their video games or whatever it might be, but then it turns off and they just kind of lose all of their motivation and seem really down when it comes time for homework or other responsibilities. um, how do we interpret that?
Yeah, it's a good one. And something that parents bring up to us as clinicians all the time. But hey, they can be on their video games all day long. It's a constant. And I think one of the most important things to do is really reflect on our young people's day. They spend 7 hours on, 7 to 8 hours a day on at school, managing academic expectations, social expectations, the changes to their bodies, the changes to what's going on in their world, and things that they don't always have the skill to really manage yet. So first, let's just think about our young people's day. Just sit there for a minute and think about all the stress that they have to manage and hold that. And then they come home, and the one thing they want to do is decompress. They do need that because we all do. How do we all feel after an 8-hour workday? Is either the first thing we want to do is jump into more work, or the first thing we want to do is sit on our couches, maybe do some binge watching, maybe grab a snack, maybe just have a moment to ourselves. So again, really thinking about that, our young people carry a lot. They really do. And that's a really important thing to reflect on. And when our young people come home and all they have left of their cup is maybe 15, 20%, no one, and I mean not a single person, wants to use the only 15, 20% of motivation and energy that they have left to engage in things that are hard, to engage in things that they don't find pleasurable. So, absolutely, it makes sense that your kids would want to come home, decompress, tune out the world, and engage in something that makes them feel good. Again, the
I can relate.
conversation, it's about balance. Everything is about balance. And it's again allowing your young people to decompress, allowing them to do something that they find enjoyable, just like we do. And
Yeah,
then say,
yeah.
again, how do we invite them back into the things that do require a little bit more energy, are not as fun. Homework is definitely
Yes.
never going to be as fun as a
Yeah.
video game or binge watching Netflix. Of course not. And then again, it's about balance. So how do we find that? How do we support how do we support our young people to inviting them back to do the things again that are hard? And how do we support them in that? Can I bring you a snack? Can I sit here with you? Can we both do work together? Can we schedule that in at, like 4? We give each other an hour, we all decompress, and then we come back to the table and try to do this together. How does that sound?
I love that, problem solving together. But it is very hard to keep in mind that they've been on all day, or that they may have had a stressful day, when they never want to share what's been going on in their life. You have kids, they come home from school, you say, "Oh, what happened today? What'd you do at school?" "Nothing. It was okay." How do you get them to start telling you what's going on?
That's a good one as well, Amy. I think that's the constant, even for clinicians. We might say, "So, how's your mood today?" "Fine." I was like, "Well, that explains so much to me." That's not going to be very helpful in trying to help,
Yeah.
to really understand. So, first things again, we've been talking a lot about modeling, right? We've been talking a lot about open conversations. How are we expressing ourselves in our home, right? And most of us aren't sharing our days with our children either. We're not coming home and opening up conversations of what it looked like. What did we do in our workday? What things do we have on our plate? And again, this is really a conversation about how are we modeling communication in our homes? How are we normalizing feelings and all kinds of expressions and being able to say it's normal? Again, so really, how do we invite our young people is we start as parents, we start sharing things with them, even if we think they're not listening. We start opening up conversations. It's like, what, today was a little bit stressful for me. I had this happen and this happen, and I talked to this person, and we were problem solving this. Again, we don't need to go into full details, but again, if we're sharing about our days and we're sharing how we're feeling about our days, that's giving our children language. That's normalizing talking about our days, communication. We're acknowledging our experiences. We're saying, that sounds like it was a hard thing for me. What do you think? Was that hard? Do you feel like that would be hard for you? Really, again, and we're having that perspective taking opportunity that we want to build for young people. Again, so it's really about conversations. It's how we're opening up these dialogues in our home and how we're modeling that for our young people. And really important, it is actually really normal for our young people not to want to talk because they spend all day talking at school. So the last thing they want to do is talk some more. So sometimes it's okay to give them that time to decompress, to allow them that space, because a lot of us don't want to keep talking after the end of the day. We all just want to tune
It,
out.
yeah. I feel like it goes from such an extreme, when they're little and they want to tell you every detail about one of their toys, and talk about something like that all the time, and you could learn to where, they don't want to tell you anything, but there's so much that's changing in their lives. And, you know, it's hard to know what is typical and what's not, especially when it comes to exploring various gender expressions. Is that very typical? Is that a kind of a regular part of becoming a teen? What should parents expect?
I think it's a really great question, and one that we get asked a lot as clinicians as well. And as a parent, I've been, also navigating this own experience for myself. I think the most important thing is to know that, expressions as a whole is normal. Like, we all express our gender in a various amounts of way. I might like long hair, but other people might like short hair. Some people like blue hair and some people like black hair. I might want to wear baggier clothing or tighter clothing. And again, that ability to really have my own style, to come into my own, and allowing our children to do that too, is so key and so important. Allowing us to express our gender in whichever way we want to is so key to development. Again, we're trying to build autonomy and agency and choice here. And one of the things we communicate when we trust our young people's experience of themselves, really key. We're trusting that our children know that who they are. We're trusting their experience of themselves, how they identify. So really, again, what are we communicating when we say, you don't know actually? or actually that's not okay, that's not appropriate, right? And I think again, it's really being able to manage our own like understandings of gender, our own understanding of gender expression, and having conversations. You know, as parents, it's really important to get support from other parents. Maybe we need support from the schools. Maybe we need support from, you know, seeking professional support from clinicians to really understand how do we have open dialogues around gender? How do I understand my own implicit biases? What are some of the, you know, misconceptions I might hold around gender? So when my child comes to me, I get very defensive. I might get very uncomfortable and I inadvertently invalidate and inadvertently dismiss, or I'm shutting down my child's experience. And that's what we're communicating. We don't want to communicate that we don't trust our young people. So it's perfectly normal for our children to come into their own style, to come into their own identity, to really explore this during this developmental period. It's absolutely a normal part of their development.
What does it mean if a child wants to use different pronouns for them?
Again, it's about trust, right? Here is what we communicate. If our child comes to us or a young person comes to us, first I want to say, great job, parents, because your child or young person feels incredibly safe. So, first things first, give yourselves a pat on the back because they feel safe enough to want to be seen authentically with you, to really express to you what's important, to really be seen, and to feel safe enough to communicate that. And I can't say enough for how many young people or children we've worked with don't want to communicate, that don't want to share with their parents. Here's how I want to present myself to the world. Here's how I authentically want to be seen. So first, I want to say thank you, parents, because you're creating such a beautiful, brave space that your young person trusts you enough to share this with you. So honor, again, honor their experience, honor their voice, allow them to tell you about themselves, not us telling them who they are. That's not what we want to do as parents. We want to trust our children that they absolutely know their experience about themselves better than we do.
Hmm, that's that's a big idea. That's a really big idea, Lena. You know that the children know more about themselves and who they are. That's, you know, I have 5 kids and each one is different regardless of how consistent I think I'm parenting each of them. So I can, that rings true for me. What should parents do if their child tells them they identify as LGBTQIA plus?
Mhm. Don't panic. Just take a
Okay.
moment, take a beat, take a deep breath, even if you don't know what to say. I think it's so important. I think most of parents that have asked me is like, what if I say the wrong thing? What if I invalidate it? What if I was dismissive? What if I said something that was wrong? What if I used the wrong pronoun? What if I, you know, didn't use the correct name? And again, I say to parents, let's take a deep breath. Again, we make mistakes because we're human beings. It doesn't mean we can't correct them. It doesn't mean that we can't come back and apologize to our children or our young people later and say, you know what, I don't know if I reacted the right way. I'm not sure that that was what I wanted to communicate to you. So again, I want to apologize. I want to say I'm sorry. So first thing, again, don't be afraid to make mistakes because then that absolutely would lead you to make some more mistakes. So taking a deep breath. Again, we want to always communicate that we love our children, first and foremost, that we love our children, that we will always love our children, because that is the truth, that right there. So, regardless of where they are and how they identify, we want to first communicate that we love our children. If your young person asks you a question that you don't know an answer to, it is okay to say that. It is say, I am not sure how to respond to this. I am not sure, you know, what would you like me to say? You know, what would you, if I don't know the answer, would you be okay with helping me understand? Or can I do my own research? Can I spend some time talking to someone who might help me better understand your experience? Maybe help me understand how do I, you know, go with you in this journey of exploration in your gender and your sexuality, really making sure that, again, that we want to support our young people. We want to be supported, and that's what we want to communicate, regardless of what they're sharing with us. We want to communicate support and love, and that we will be here with them, that we're going to walk with them, that we're going to learn with them, and that we will make mistakes, because this is new. Parents, this is new. If your young person is identified, you might not know anything about it, and that is okay. And it is our job to learn. It is not okay to put the burden only and onus on our young people to teach us. We need to be intentional about what we do to learn how to support our young people, whether it's supporting them because they are loving soccer, whether it's supporting them because they're identifying as non-binary, whether it's supporting them because they identify as lesbian, gay, or bisexual, whether it's supporting them because they like everyone of all genders and all sexualities, whether it's supporting them because they want to be an astronaut or a ballerina or a teacher or any number of things. Remember that we are here to support our young people in their lives, because at the end of this is their bodies. It is their choice. It is their life. And again, which role we play in that is our choice. So making sure that we're communicating what we want to communicate. And if we're making mistakes, let's own them. Let's own them, parents. We can do that. We can make mistakes, we can own them, and we can apologize and try to do better.
So, what does mental health really look like in adolescence? If we're thinking about, there's so many different ways that kids can express themselves, what is mental health then?
I think that's a really great question as well. And I think one of the biggest things here is really to understand that we have this really big period in time. Adolescence is actually really big. We have so much happening in this developmental period. And it's some of the most important things occurring during this time. We're developing identity during this time. Our bodies are changing during this time. And a lot of it is really uncomfortable. A
Yeah,
lot of it is
miserable.
Absolutely. A lot of it can cause a lot of anxiety. Social expectations grow phenomenally during the adolescent period. Peer pressure becomes a thing during this time. So really, I think it's so important to understand there's so much in this developmental period that our young people are going through. There's part of the brain that's developing during this period too. Like when we think of the frontal lobe, that's a really important part. We talk about executive functioning. That is something that is developing during adolescence. I can't say enough for how many parents say to me, they don't understand the consequences. And that's because they're still learning. They're still developing that part of themselves, that ability to organize. When we say, oh my gosh, they didn't do this or this, that ability to prioritize, that ability to really manage their impulses. Come on, people. I really want us to be honest here. How many of us can really manage our own impulses to want to either eat that ice cream when we know we shouldn't, when to have that extra cheeseburger when maybe we shouldn't? So really understanding that this adolescent period, there's so much happening, so much still developing, that it is absolutely normal for our young people not to understand long-term consequences or even short-term. It is understandable that our young people are still coming into their own identity, that they're exploring maybe one day this identity, another one, a whole different one, and that is okay.
So,
It's a period of exploration and learning.
yeah. So that said, with, some of those pieces of impulse control and um, thinking about consequences not being fully developed, uh, how much should we be concerned and really kind of carefully watching whether it's um, going through a young person's phone or when they're not sharing details about their day, how involved should we get, knowing that some of their decision making skills are still not developed?
I think that's a great question. I think that it's really important that we understand there are very natural consequences to choices, right? We don't always have to be the bad person. There are going to be natural consequences that happen at school, that happen outside of school, the community, and their social relationships, and that is how they learn. These are normative like adolescent opportunities to learn how to problem solve, how to navigate social peer pressure and challenges, how to build empathy and perspective taking, how to develop, again, that ability to really recognize consequence. How do we do that if we haven't actually experienced it? Obviously, we don't want them to experience large consequences. We want to talk about safety every single day. So if we're having conversations around safety, online safety, phone safety, if we're having these continuous conversations around sex and, things that we need to be careful of, safe sex practices, if we're having conversations all the time, if we're being open and having dialogue, we also want to communicate trust and autonomy to our young people. Independence is a perfectly normal thing that our young people are going to want during this period. So you want to build trust. And how do we do that? We communicate it. And how do we communicate it? By trusting our young people, by allowing them that, and also recognizing that there are natural consequences when they make decisions that require a consequence. What are we communicating? We're saying these are opportunities to learn, right? We're saying these are privileges that you have. And here's how we have to address that consequence when you make a decision that puts you in a precarious position, whether it was a safety risk, whether it was a decision about not doing their homework, it's an expectation that wasn't being met. Again, there are natural consequences, allowing that to happen, but also allowing very normative opportunities to learn to navigate situations. Yes, they are building these skills, but the only way to build them is by allowing these opportunities to happen, to really allow your children to experience natural consequences, both positive and negative. This is what we need to be allowing to happen.
It feels, that parents, we get kind of uh, wrapped up in having to be the ones in some ways to be really monitoring so many things, because whether it's schools give you um, an online way to look at your students' grades, or setting screen time on the phones and getting the reports about what they're viewing on your phone, or the amount of time they're spending. So, I the trust piece of kind of letting them experience those natural consequences almost becomes a challenge to our own um, self-regulation, right? In how do we avoid not going too far with invading that kind of privacy, or allowing kids to just move in the way that they're going to and experience that. How do we best support a young person on a daily basis, given all of that?
Yeah, I think that's so key, Amy. Really being able to manage our own anxiety as parents, right? Our own need to want to prevent consequences. We're constantly trying to protect our young people. And this is a very normal experience as a parent. We all want to do this. I mean, if most of us could put our kids in bubbles, we probably would. We're not going to lie about that. I probably would. And again, we deny them very normal experiences, opportunities to learn about themselves, to build their own resiliency, to build their own agency, to build efficacy, right? This idea that I can do it, that I can manage things. So on a day-to-day, how do we support our young people and our children? We listen. Again, we're listening, we're paying attention, we're allowing them to tell us what they need. And then we're modeling, again, really healthy coping in our homes for ourselves and for our young people. How are we managing stress? How are we talking about stress in our home? How are we talking about a number of things, right? Instead of feeling I'm so uncomfortable with this idea, let's do our own work, parents. Where do we get the support? You joined us today. That's your first step. Where do you go after this? Where do you go to continue to learn, not only building insight into your own anxiety, if you're constantly stepping into wanting to problem solve or wanting to make sure they're not experiencing natural consequences, really, again, it's having conversations with our young people. Here's what I did today. Here's what the conversations I'm having, so supporting them on a daily basis is really centering their voice, really honoring their experience. It's validating, it's acknowledging and recognizing that this is absolutely a difficult period. And we are here. We are here to support them. We are here to be their guides when they need us to be. We are here to be their support and backbones when they need us to be that. And again, but we're asking what it is they need and not just stepping in to tell them what they need.
So, we're getting to a point in the conversation where I think probably some of the folks that are viewing may have some questions or still be wondering. And if you do have questions, feel free to type them in. But they may be wondering, what is normative adolescence versus a mental health condition? When does something qualify as a mental health condition?
It's a great question, Amy. For us as clinicians, again, we're looking at their functioning, we're looking at the behavior. It's what is causing the challenge here. So again, anxiety is a normal experience. It's a normal emotion. We're going to feel it. But if that anxiety, again, it's causing a simple morning routine from 15 to 20 minutes to turn into an hour, we're looking at that impairment in function. When we look at your children's lives or your young person's life, we're looking at their academic functioning. Are they no longer doing any work in school? Are they're not able to concentrate or focus so much that they're not accessing any aspect of their curriculum? They're not learning. They're not attending to. We're looking at their social relationships. Are they hanging out with friends? Or are they just isolating and withdrawing? We're looking at their vocational skills. We're looking at different aspects of their life and trying to see, is there an impairment in any of those areas? And if there is, that is when we're talking about a mental health condition. It's not so much that they experience anxiety. It's when the anxiety causes an impairment. It's not that they're depressed, because we all feel depressed at some point. It's that depression is causing an impairment in functioning. Again, so it's really looking at the behavior. It's looking at what they're no longer able to do, and when they no longer find pleasure in things, right? If they're not really experiencing being happy. I think this is a constant question for us around the country. And again, it's really important and clear when parents say, well, they just want to play video games. Does it make them happy though? It's about balance. Finding things that make your children happy is about balance. If they find something that really makes them feel good, makes them feel successful, because let's be honest, there are very few things that make us feel successful. Things are very hard, and school is hard. Social peer pressure is hard. They're experiencing this maybe for the first time. The expectations are growing each and every day for them, and they're doing their best to navigate it. So again, it is hard. So really just being able to pay attention, to listen, to support, to validate and acknowledge our young people, centering their voices and their experience is so key and important.
So, how can therapy help youth of all ages? Is it appropriate regardless of age, or are there different things that we should be doing based on, if they're preschool, middle school, high school, if they don't, if they say they won't go to therapy?
Absolutely, great question. So again, a child can come to therapy at any age. Any person at any age could come to therapy. We have clinicians that are specialized to treat every developmental period. You have, clinicians that are more generalists in the sense that they can just treat children and adolescents. There are therapists that work with adults. So again, any child at any age could access therapy. It looks very different for our young kids. We might do more of a play-based therapy. For adolescents, we do a lot more talk-based therapy. We use a lot more of their cognitive abilities to engage them in therapy interventions. One of the key here, that therapy can help in a lot of different ways for young children, adolescents. We do a lot of work around giving them language, really naming their experience, helping them to understand what is happening, and then build the tools to help them manage that anxiety, manage their depression, manage the behavioral challenge. We also support parents in learning how to support their young people. So the skill that we're building with a child or an adolescent or a young person, we're also sharing with the parent. We're also helping them to learn the skills so that we're modeling and we're reinforcing in the home. So not only are we teaching the children and young people, but then we are reinforcing that skill by teaching the parents. So therapy can always be helpful. It's a space to focus on their internal world. It's a space to learn how to articulate or express their emotions in a more healthy way. And it's a space to learn some adaptive coping. Some healthy coping is always good for all of us.
All right. I have one more question, and then I'd love to switch over to some of the audience questions. What are some common risk factors for young people? I know one of the questions we'll get to is around social media. Are there risk factors there? Are there just risk factors that maybe you don't realize in your own home? What should we look out for?
Absolutely. I really want to acknowledge that anything could really be a risk factor for our young people and children. Again, they're in navigating social environments. So stress is one of the risk factors. So things are going to feel stressful, whether it's academic stress, whether it's social stress, whether it's stress at home because our family is stressed, right? There are a lot of things that happen within our homes that might be stressful, whether we're moving, whether they're moving schools, whether there's conflict in the home between us as parents and how we're navigating conflict, so those can be stressful, just again, adolescence is a really difficult period. There are a lot of things going on with their bodies that is very stressful. So again, stress, trauma, really significant changes to the home environment, the stability of our homes, but also academic related stress. There's a lot of that in our communities right now. We have to acknowledge that we had a pandemic that was stressful, and our children had 2 years where they had no opportunities to practice being able to navigate social challenges, develop social skills, really work with peers. So now we place them all back into this environment, told them, do your best while
Yeah.
managing your academic stress. So again, there are a lot of risk factors for these age groups. And again, really acknowledging again that they do experience stress and their life can be very stressful.
Yeah. So that question on social media, allowing social media at all, one of the articles that I mentioned in that series they're doing talked about how although the pandemic has really had an impact on young people, that this was something that we've seen trending all the way back till 2009, keeping in mind that iPhones kind of came into play around 2007. So I think that makes us all a little worried about social media, how much time kids are spending on devices. What are your thoughts there?
Mhm. I think that there are a lot of different ways to think of social media, both a positive light and a negative one, right? And the positive, it allows for connection, it allows to build networks. And really, our young people are so creative in their use of media that sometimes I'm awed by these amazing platforms that they use to center their own voices and the way that they become allies for marginalized groups. And I can't say enough for the advocacy that I see online through social media. And again, this is a platform we're using today to bring awareness. So social media absolutely can be positive. And the negative frame, social media does absolutely add to unrealistic expectations around beauty and body and weight and shape, around, people being happy all the time. And these are conversations we do need to have with our young people and children. This isn't always going to be a depiction of normal life. This isn't always going to be a depiction of what we think of healthy bodies or what we think of beauty, so it's really a conversation around like, who do you follow? Let's make sure that you're also including people that reflect you, both your color, your ethnic race, and you're thinking about your body and size. You're thinking about a lot of different things that like ways that you identify, aspects of your identity, that we're following like a real big, broad range of people, not just selective people that often leave you feeling bad, often leave you feeling like your life isn't great, or that you're not that happy, or you don't have that much success going on for you, or your body doesn't look like that. So again, really thinking through like, how much is this adding to my young person's life and how much is it taking away? Having conversations around who they're following, because if they're only following people, artists that don't really show much of like a normal, healthy lifestyle, then that's really important to recognize that what is the expectation they have about what is about beauty, about bodies, about life, about non-stressful life, about like, I'd love to live on a yacht, but that's not a usual person's like life, I'd love to have all this money too. That's also not the normal person's life here in the United States. So again, it's about balance. It's about making sure that they're following a broad choice of people and different areas of life. And again, if your young person's using it to advocate and use it as a platform for change, encourage it. Really support them in the way that they're using it in a positive way.
Yeah. And I think they're talking a lot too about, um, making sure that they shut it off and get enough sleep, that if it interferes with the basics of your daily routine, that can really have an impact. Um, this is a tough one, but one of the viewers asked, any tips on how to talk to your kids about events like the massacre that just happened in Buffalo and kind of other domestic terrorism and just trauma that we've seen around the country and the world, whether it's the news in Ukraine or things that are just constantly flooding our news streams. How do we talk to kids about those really tough issues?
I think the most important thing is talking about them. We have to have conversations, having or saying to ourselves that our young people aren't listening or that they don't know about these events, that isn't what's happening. They have access to everything. Their schools are talking about it. They might have heard it on the radio. They might have heard it from a peer at school. So one of the first things is to do is open up the dialogue. Ask them what they heard, ask them what they understand happened, really being able to get the information from them so that you're able to either correct information or help manage any anxiety they have around their safety. Again, having conversations that this absolutely makes us feel unsafe. This absolutely causes us to feel a number of different emotions when these things happen around the country. So we want to be opening up the dialogue, really having our children tell us what they understood, what's happening, so that we could gently also support them, really say to them, I'm really sorry this is happening. It's making me feel scared and worried. I wonder if that's making you feel scared and worried. I feel a little unsafe about going to the grocery store. What do you think? And again, really having a conversation about, like, maybe a friend at school that doesn't look like you might have a different experience than you, right? If they're a person of color, they might feel that much more intensely. How do you feel about supporting friends? Because our young people are also supporting each other. So it's really important. Again, like, are people asking you for support? Are you talking about this? Is there any way that I can support you in supporting your friends? Is it important for you to set some boundaries around how much support you can provide to people during this time? And what can we do to ourselves to help us feel safe? What are some things that we can do as a family? Can we make sure that we have our phones with us? Can we make sure that we're having conversations around safety, around schools? Because let's be honest, people, this is happening and it's happening around the country. So we do need to be having conversations with our young people. If there is something that happens at school, here's what I want you to do. Here's what you need to do. We need to have the hard conversations. As uncomfortable as they feel, we need to have them.
Mm. Oh, that's hard. Those are the things, that's when you just want to turn off the news at night and say, "Oh, I don't want you at this age to have to think about these things, but I understand we need to um they're going to experience it, and they need to know how to process that." Um on another point, somebody asked, any advice for supporting a child, young adult, Gen Z with agoraphobia? How can we encourage them to get outside of their comfort zone? And I'm sure this could be for a couple of different experiences, to get outside of their comfort zone without making them feel like they're behind in developing their independence.
Yeah, that's a really good question. And again, it's a very normal for our young people to experience some form of social anxiety. It's a very common thing that occurs. And because, again, the expectations are very, very high during this period. So one of the things that we could do is, again, gently encourage to step out together. We can, when we talk about exposure, and it's usually how we generally manage anxiety, we're talking about small amounts of exposure. We can make a list of things that are from, 0 being the least thing that they're scared of to 10 being the highest, and say, let's build a number of experience and slowly start to increase, slowly start to, again, allow them the experience of both tolerating the distress and building their sense of agency. Again, okay, this wasn't as bad. So how many times have we all in our heads created this huge scenario about how bad this was going to be? And then we finally did it, and then we're like, wasn't as bad as I thought. Or, hey, I totally survived. One of my, thing that, did you die? No, we didn't. So, hey, so the worst thing that could happen, what was it? Did it happen? No. And if it did you survive it? Yes. So again, really allowing them to build agency slowly, really building their level of being able to tolerate that distress. It's really key and important for really managing some of that anxiety.
Well, when is it best to consider medication in combination with seeking professional help in kids with developing bodies. That's,
Mhm.
I'm sure, different for everyone, but maybe you can give us some general advice.
Absolutely. First, I want to normalize how difficult this decision is. I, as a parent, completely empathize with any parent who is considering medication. It's absolutely a difficult decision. We completely understand that for any parent, for developing minds and bodies, that this would be a hard decision. As a therapist, I always want to say, here, well, let's start here. Let's start here and see if therapy can really move us in the direction of progress. And we're constantly having this assessment. We're assessing as clinicians, making sure that our interventions are effective, that they're able to move past, some of the first obstacles of building some of their coping skills, really building their agency, really engaging in therapeutic interventions. The problem is when they can't engage. So if a child is too depressed, where they don't have the energy or the motivation to engage in an intervention, to really take what we're learning in session and use it outside when it counts, that's when I start having conversations about this therapy isn't being very, supportive at the moment because it's not something that your young person is able to do or your child is able to do. If the anxiety is so high that they can't tolerate the conversation about the thing that they feel worried about, I can't do therapy. It's hard to build in an intervention around exposure, around building, conversations around the things that they worry about if I can't even get them past that. So again, I have a conversation where the anxiety is just too high. We're not engaging in the therapeutic intervention. So it's not very effective. So again, the concern is there. Remember, agencies such as Brightline, other hospitals and other pediatric psychiatrists are constantly working with developing minds. That is all they do. They're working with developing bodies and know that children around the country are using medication to help reduce their anxiety, reduce their depression, so that therapy can in itself be useful. And once it is, we remove the Band-Aid and we allow therapy to continue. It doesn't have to be this lifelong thing. It's not this thing that causes this addiction. No, medication is meant to be supportive and medication isn't meant to be lifelong. Therapy is meant to be supportive and it's also not meant to be lifelong. We want to get to a place where, again, we reduce the impairment in functioning, we're building their coping skills, and they're able to manage the stress and the anxiety and the depression in a very healthy way in their lives.
Lena, this was so helpful and just really informative. I think everyone, I hope, got so much out of it as I did. I want to thank all of our viewers for logging in and for taking this action today on Mental Health Action Day. Thank you to Brightline for putting a great resource in front of us with Lena, and I hope you all have a great afternoon. Thanks so much, everyone.
Thank you.